Welcome to Meeting the Inconceivable, a podcast exploring Zen koans, dreams, and the creative life produced by Pacific Zen Institute. Pacific Zen has a legacy of preserving and reimagining the koan tradition to meet our own times. With a lively community of artists, innovators, and seekers of all kinds that extends worldwide, our mission is to create a culture of transformation through meditation, koans, the arts, and conversations about the deepest matters. In this episode, Roshi John Tarrant takes up a case from the Gateless Gate collection. In it, a follower of another tradition asks the Buddha, "I'm not asking about what you can say in words. I'm not asking about what you can't say in words." The Buddha just sat for a long while. The follower sighed and praised him, saying, "World-honored one, with your great compassion you've parted the clouds of my delusion, and now I can enter the way." After the follower left, the Buddha's attendant Ananda asked, "What did you prove to that person so that she could enter the way?" The Buddha said, "She is like a racehorse who runs at the mere shadow of a whip." In this episode, Tarrant discusses the age-old metaphor of four kinds of racehorses in the Dharma, from the one who runs at the mere shadow of a whip to the one who must be whipped to the bone. He offers that although we all want to be the best horse, it's the worst horse that actually helps us on our way. Plus, Buddha loves the worst horse best.
What is it like being here, having life, and feeling this life? We often, give away our life hoping for a later improved version. But if we have the life we have, it's full of vastness and brightness and eternity. Everything is here. So there is that. We can't have a temple without an us. One little bit of meditation is all of meditation. One little bit of life is all of life. One little jewel where the net's threads cross is all of the universe. One little you is Buddha. So, considering Thanksgiving is coming up, and as a barbarous Australian, I was initially delighted by Thanksgiving, which seems such a great thing, celebrate Indigenous people, be grateful, things like that. And I found out how tormented and filled with chagrin and guilt many of my friends were about showing up to Thanksgiving. And although, a good thing, but how much, I suppose, people felt like they had to perform or do things well. And I began to experience this myself, actually, by I thought, well, I'll prepare a turkey for my friends, and then I burned it. And so I can see the traps of trying to overperform. I guess I want to talk about the notion of being the worst horse today, because everybody wants to be the best horse, but being the worst horse is really something. And then you realize that's where Buddha is, So I'll get to that, but first of all, Thanksgiving thing, I think it's a standard Dharma thing, really, about how, well, if we meet what's appearing, that old saying about all the things in the world advance and meet you. That's enlightenment. Meet the self. When you chase out after all the things, that's called delusion. When all the things come to meet you, that's enlightenment. And so there's some spirit of that, like whatever we have. This, the great Mao Tzu's great saying that's been with me all the time in the epidemic, really, that the entire meaning of your life resides in the current matter. So where you're going to find delight, where you're going to find love, it must be here, the very place you're often running away from, or trying to distract yourself from, or whatever, I don't know, whatever your thing is, But the magic, the magic and the sort of the wonderful embrace is here. So just to say that, and how hard it is, and we think, yeah, that's right, and we feel it, and you can feel like as you come into the temple and begin to sit a bit, your mind stops chasing around quite so much, and you can feel, oh, I'm here. What a good idea. Why wasn't I informed? Why didn't I try it earlier? Because you're that kind of Buddha who doesn't try it earlier until we don't ever find it until we find it. And so that's part of the whole thing about, I think, about all celebration and coming together. Well, it must be here, so let's enjoy that. Let's have that. And, Thanksgiving can be a wonderful thing. One of my friends, when I said, well, what's Thanksgiving about? And he's from Brooklyn, and he's Jewish, and he said, well, a lot of people sit around the table, and sometimes you hardly know them. They're second cousins or something. And I said, what sort of people? He said, well, last Thanksgiving, there was a mafia guy at one end of the table and a concert violinist at the other. So I thought, oh, that sounds good. And the way, in a way we think of people we haven't thought of for a while at such a time. So there's that too. So I want to start with a koan about, it's really about it's enough, I suppose, really. But it's in a couple of different contexts, but it's about someone who wasn't a Buddhist, who was a philosopher of some kind, but questions the Buddha. And it's that the usual Zen thing about how you don't have to be an insider to get it, just as you are is good. So a non-Buddhist, I'm reading from somebody else's translation here because I can't remember mine. So here we are. A non-Buddhist asked the world-honored one. The world-honored one is a term for the Buddha, meaning long ago and far away in the time of the myth. I do not ask for words, nor do I ask for non-words. Not words, not silence. The world-honored one just remains seated, just like this. So we'll just sit for a bit. And then the outsider, the non-Buddhist, praised the world-honored one, saying, the great compassion of the world-honored one has dispelled the clouds of my ignorance and enabled me to get enlightened. And he bowed in gratitude and left. And Buddha had Ananda with his secretary, who was kind of, in the legend, had a photographic memory, so could write down everything everybody said, but also, he was the straight man who most of the time didn't really quite understand what was going on. It's one of those poignant, interesting positions. But it's an archetypal thing on its own. He was the person who didn't understand with the person who understood. So Ananda asked the Buddha, what realization did that philosopher have that made him praise you like that? World-honored one says, he's like the fine horse that runs even at the shadow of a whip. And there's a sutra about, which is a complicated name, and I don't know anybody who reads it anymore, but it's got this one story about, about the kinds of students. There's the horse who runs even at the shadow of the whip, who even at the hearing of the possibility of suffering begins to turn towards the way. And then there's the horse who runs when they just get tapped by the whip and feel grief or whatever they feel, and then they turn towards the Dharma. And then there's the horse that needs to be whacked a few times in order to run. And then there's the horse that needs to be whipped and whipped and whipped and whipped. And so that's the metaphor. And the thing I wanted to point to today was Shunryu Suzuki, who was the great master who was the founder of San Francisco Zen Center. And he said, when you hear this, everybody wants to be the best horse, or at least the second best horse. And we run through our lives thinking, well, you know. And Suzuki says this great thing. He said, but that wouldn't be Buddha's attitude. He would love the worst horse. He would have a feeling for kindness of the worst horse. And it's such a marvelous idea because, when I think I'm the best horse, or I'm the second, or at least the second best, or whatever it is, immediately I'm defending myself and holding a position and fighting with life. My whole youth was like this, really. But an example I remember was sometimes just not reaching beyond where we are is good. When I was first in a temple, trying to sit, and I found a tremendous trouble sitting still, which neurologically was like very difficult for me. And actually, I love this office chair because I can wriggle in it and blame the chair. But I'm sitting in. But wriggling is just one of those things I've done all my life as a child. Sit still, Mr. Tarrant. And I'm learned to sit still in Zendos, which is good for me. But anyway, I was not the fine horse. And I remember seeing people in that Zendo, people would have these big awakening experiences because it's kind of enlightenment factory, and cooker, and that seemed good to me. And I noticed that other people would have these experiences and I wouldn't, and I would then try harder and harder, and I was always touched by other people having experience, but it didn't seem to help me. And then and I think I was the worst horse because I was sort of crazed and just wanting to meditate all the time and get enlightened. So I wasn't much use to anybody. And then I'd do things like replace the Zendo roof, things like that. What are you doing? I'm replacing the roof. Why didn't you tell me? Well, it was leaky. So that's sort of worst horse. And but there's something marvelous about being the worst horse, and at some stage realizing, well, this is where I am and who I am. If I'm the worst horse, well, that's what I'm going to have to be, and that's where my Buddha nature must be. And I remember feeling a tremendous sort of sudden, I think I didn't really start to learn how to meditate, actually. Well, I suppose I was purifying before that in some way, but learned how to meditate till I realized even if I didn't have the big glamorous experiences people were looking for, I was going to keep doing this. And they would in some way serve life. And I would sort of meditate and, I could ring bells or whatever was needed to work in the garden. And there was something, all of life is in everything we have, There's no moment, however unglamorous, that doesn't have the whole of our lives. So if you think of the time when you really screwed up, or the thing you can't do and you keep trying to do, or like I have them before, I don't know, I like technology, but technology doesn't always like me. Like the whole system just crashed just before we came on. It's a great thing for me because I can just enjoy it. Well, everybody's going to be waiting or not. And so I got it going again, but it's mysterious why it crashed and why it got going, things like that. So worst horse stuff, and I think we have to, if we can enjoy it, which I actually did this time. I thought, well, it might be fun for people if they come on and I'm not there. So we could enjoy that, The whole meaning of our life is contained in the current matter. So if you think of the things you feel like were your failures, bad divorce, or you're having problems with your child, or problems with your parents, or problems with yourself, they're really always problems with ourselves, then perhaps you don't need to get through that straight away, but be here in it. And that's the worst. The worst horse is the only one who can get enlightened is the worst horse. Because they're the only one who can really be where they are. Anyway, and so let's enjoy the worst horseness. Remember, not the second worst horse, the worst horse. So a philosopher came to the Buddha and said, I do not ask for words, I do not ask for non-words. And the Buddha said nothing. And after taking this in, the philosopher bowed and said, the compassion of the one that the whole world honors, the compassion, your compassion has allowed me to enter the way, and left. And then the Buddha's assistant, whose job was to ask the question that everybody else was too embarrassed to ask, but he was too clueless not to ask, he said, what did that philosopher see? What did that outsider see that he said those things? And the Buddha said, the fine horse runs at the shadow of a whip. And if you wish, or perhaps we can just feel, you can feel here, if you feel into your body and what you can see and what, the feeling of this time of your life, the feeling of the things that upset you, the feeling of the things you love, the feeling of being you. And somehow the Buddha's representative is you. Actually, that's putting it to you, a Buddha. The Buddha is you. The Buddha doesn't have any other yous available apart from you. So, which is rather wonderful. We worry about ourselves, but think of the Buddha's problem. He's got to put up with us being Buddha. Enjoy it. Everything you complain about, enjoy that. Everything you think was a failure, enjoy that. Everything you think was an indignity. That is Buddha's indignity. Everything you think was an inconsolable grief. That is Buddha's. And perhaps there is no moment that is not free and pure. There's no moment that is not the Buddha's moment, really. So just feeling the time. What did that outsider see that made him bow and say those things? The fine horse runs at the shadow of the whip. And just to feel the silence and feel what it's like to be you, and Buddha to be found nowhere else. Let it spread out from your own heart and cover the world. All thoughts are the Buddha's thoughts, all sounds the Buddha's sounds. All horses are the Buddha's horse. I do not ask for words, I do not ask for non-words. And the Buddha just sat there. That became a fairly common teaching in Zen. And, someone would ask for a teaching and the teacher would just sit there. Sometimes it didn't work. It didn't help, but sometimes it did. Because there's so much wildness in explaining and in the mind, and try this method and that method. It's enough. All we have this very minute is enough. So if you notice, what is it like? What is it like to be me? This life that is the Buddha's life. And if you notice whatever comes up in your mind to object to that, fairly sensible statement, this life must be the life you're having, then, that's the delusion, the worst horse delusion. But the worst horse delusion is really the gate. Feeling I'm terrific and the best horse isn't much use to us. And also it is incredibly tiring because you just have to keep proving yourself, And but if you enter that place, you feel afraid or inferior or sorrow. Oh, if you can include that, there's a light in that. And you might be, the worst horse might be the most helpful. And if you get restless in meditation, then enter there, that's your worst horse. So maybe if you get annoyed at other people getting restless, that's your worst horse. Someone was trying to tell me about emptiness the other day, and since I'm the worst horse, I didn't do a very good job of understanding. but it was a sort of nice thing in a way. And when the thing the mind does when we're thinking, oh God, I've got to be the best horse, I've got to try harder, and then suddenly think, wait, what's wrong with the worst horse? That kind of surprise, the joy of it, actually, that's what the old teacher meant by emptiness. That emptiness, the joke quality in life, undoes all our longing and striving and explanations and bullying people into agreeing with our theory, that sort of thing. So the worst horse got a lot to be said for it in that way. I want to call on the worst horse for fighting people. Karen has been sending me, Karen and I work together a lot, but Karen's been sending me all sorts of stuff about the worst horse, and she's which is really, I found really kind of fun. So tell us something about the worst horse, Karen.
Well, I learned about the worst horse when I was 18 and got the book Zen Mind Beginner's Mind, which had the story of the worst horse in it. And I was in architecture school, and it was a big struggle, and I was used to being a kind of best horse person. I took a deep plunge into being the worst horse, and I'm still swimming in worst horse territory. But I moved to San Francisco after I finished architecture school and had been working for a little bit, and moved out here, and I had the book with me, and I just kept reading all about emptiness, which I did not understand. I'd never sat meditation. I just had this book and was very moved by the notion that Buddha loves the worst horse. It just touched me a lot that I might be okay just the way I was, but I was really lost. Really, really lost. And so I read this book almost every day. Did not understand a word of it, but it felt so true to me. It just went to my heart and felt very comforted by the notion of a great, great love that could include me. That's what came through.
Thanks, that's great. That was your practice, and that was your koan, the worst horse. Just like I was the feral monk in the monastery, and like just trying to break through my koan. You were worst horse, trying to include things. That's really good. It was probably a better strategy than mine. People say, hang on, can I talk to you for a minute? No. So that was my worst horse, but your worst horse was feeling your way through all those things. So thanks, Karen. That's great. The test, got anything to say?
Sure. The thing I keep thinking of is when I was in my early 20s and I had to take Aikido for a few months. And I had taken martial arts before, but Aikido is this extremely strange thing where your only job for as long as you can possibly bear it is to learn how to find your own center and the center in the other person. And no matter how much anyone tries to tell you how to do it or show you how to do it, it is absolutely impossible for months and months and months. And when you finally feel it, like a 70-something old lady can throw a giant man, but I remember talking to some of the people in the class who are these
incredibly competent doctors and lawyers, and they said they would just come out to their car for months and just weep and weep and weep when they would because there was no way of getting around the you have to actually fully inhabit your experience completely to have any idea what's going on. And even all the falls and all the mishaps and everything that can go wrong, it's like that you have to be the worst horse for just as long as you can bear it. And I also think about a relationship I was in my 20s that went on for like 6 years of being absolutely the worst horse because I kept trying to jump over the difficulty of it, and I'd try to get out of it, and then I'd get sucked back into it. And it wasn't until I could just have it be a complete shit show that I could really learn what was actually happening in me and in what I was trying to understand about what I was doing. So, yeah, taking it to the limit seems like something about being the worst horse.
Talking to my friend my book agent actually, the other day, and I said, well, he was talking about some difficulty he was having. I said, well, you could take the ride, and then he decided this, which to me was kind of like obvious and slightly cliched thing. And he said, wow, that's a koan. I'm just going to hold that. So that's what you're talking about. That's what, if you're the worst horse, take that ride. Yeah. Jason Garner's here, and do you want? I don't know if you want to say anything, Jason, but you're in the midst of all sorts of madness usually. So.
Hi, John. I didn't plan to talk. I got in at 3 a.m. here to Houston, so I'm feeling like the worst horse today.
Wait, it's not when I call on you, you can just smile and wave, and that's good enough. But,
I was thinking I had a client who was a singer who sang on horseback, and he had these beautiful horses that would dance to the music. It was something that was quite stunning. And I was just thinking that his favorite horse was the one that wouldn't dance when he wanted it to dance. And it reminded me of him a bit, stubborn and this kind of old cowboy, but and in the end, the horse was the fan favorite too, and so kind of like it just went to its own beat and did its own thing. And yeah, the worst horse.
thank you. Thanks for showing up when you're up till 3 a.m, and good luck in Houston. Someone else I want to talk to. Michelle Riddle, did you want to say anything about worst horses? I like that horse who won't dance to the music.
I found myself thinking a few different things. And one thing in the middle of all my thoughts, something that jumped to mind was Thanksgiving. And going back to that idea and thinking about one of the Thanksgiving events that's coming up for me, and it's going to just be very small and members of my immediate family. And I was thinking about how even now, as old as we all are, we're still learning how to love each other. And that this whole best horse, worst horse thing is related to that process. Because when I want to be the best horse in the family, like if some piece of me thinks I should be the best horse daughter or the best horse cook or the best horse whatever, that it creates this sort of barrier, this sort of wall. And when I'm willing, and to me, this is a really big thing about the worst horse. We don't have any idea what the worst horse is, of course, It's like the ugly duck, like according to whom. But we have some idea in our head. And if we're just willing to be the worst, to my mind, that's enough. Like that's it to me, in that just risking the possibility that I'm going to be the worst at whatever, that feels like enough. And that makes possibilities happen. And the only other thing I wanted to say was just thinking about all the years I spent sitting in zendos and when we were in person, and it would be time for a talk and someone would give a talk and then everybody's listening. And there would be that thing like John was describing with Ananda, like, well, like all these people were too embarrassed to ask questions. I mean, you could feel it in the room. And then maybe there was someone that somebody thought was so clueless, they would ask a question, you know? And that just there in that concept, you know, that brings up that idea of a worst horse. But I would watch, and the people who were willing to ask whatever their question actually was, be it whatever clueless means or not, it was where they were. They weren't stuck. They stopped being stuck, and they could continue on their journey. And so I had, you know, always tremendous respect for the people who said whatever their question was, and I saw it to be really, really helpful in people's practice. So thanks.
Thanks. It's a kind of nice thing, isn't it? Wait, I was reaching past it all the time. Yeah. I'm going to call on someone I've never called on before and don't know, just because I think I saw Sonoma County sky in your background. So, Margot, do you have anything to say about the worst horse? Margaret? Yeah, you got it. Good.
In Sonoma County, yes, a beautiful day today. And I've recently fallen in love with my neighbor's horse, who I visit every day. And she's a little pony. I think she's my best horse right now. I have no idea too much. I'm learning about her, and we spend time twice a day together. And yeah, as far as my best horse and worst horse, I liked what you said about just understanding the worst horse in yourself, be it whatever age you're at. That sort of resonated. Guilty of leaving the back of my car door open and losing a bunch of stuff yesterday. And I was thinking, my age. But anyway, I feel better today.
Well, thank you, Margot. Good luck with your little pony. I think what I'd like to do, there's some more people to call on, but what I'd like to do is meditate a bit more. Are you ready? You ready to do the worst meditator? And I think the thing is not to say, oh, well, I can't do it, but to say, to just, in meditation, the compassion is always there. We start with what we have and who we are and how it is to be us. And then all the gates open. The poem, this koan about the philosopher occurs in a lot of places, but the poem an old Chinese teacher called Wu Men said was, running along the edge of a sword, walking on the sharp ridge of an ice floe. There are no steps. Let go of your hold on the cliff. There are no steps to take. And another old Japanese teacher said, the Buddha's eyes penetrate all the worlds. The sight of the philosopher extends to heaven. The heart of the flower is tender, the peach blossoms smile, the light of spring rests not just in the willow leaves. Now we could say, not just in the maple leaves falling, the light of autumn. The Buddha sat silently, and the philosopher said, you have released me from the clouds of my delusion, and bowed and left. This music has released me from the clouds of my delusion. This quiet has released me from the clouds of my delusion. And this is the only moment we have. We have this time together. And how good it is to just let it in to our bodies and our hearts. We feel at least I feel, let's be accurate here, I feel how vast it is to be here, and how sort of irretrievable, we can't take it back, how wonderful it is to be alive, can't be taken back. How profound it is to be human, to have this life, this worst horse life. So I suppose there is something important about listening to the rhythm and the shape of things as they come to greet us. But worrying about mistakes seems like too much work. And so there's nobody to look down on. Nobody to look down on, not even ourselves. I think I'm really enjoying being the worst horse. I don't know if you can see that. That's the horses from Chevet Cave. They're one of the most ancient. There's really old paintings, far older than Lascaux, and you can see the rhythm of the horses running together and the beauty of that. Which one is the worst horse? Eduardo Fuentes, do you have anything you want to say about worst horses? We don't have time for a lot, but Eduardo.
Yes, it reminds me when I was in academia, in which they used this business of, the worse horse, the better horse, to manipulate us. Very ugly. I remember one time the chairman of the department called me and said, "You are the obvious leader for the terrestrial group, and you should manage so that you are the whole terrestrial group is better than the marine group in the department." And I felt it was so manipulative. So I said, "No, I won't do that." And in general, in academia, it's used to quote stimulate us.
But what about when you feel like you're the worst horse?
Yes, and I frequently happen. I always try to be in academia at least the first horse. We're very close to the first, second, third horse, but the worst is unacceptable.
Thanks, Eduardo. Eduardo's just studying to teach with us. Normally he's in Chile, but now he's in the States, yeah. So, and he's teaching tomorrow night, I believe. So look it up on PZI website. Okay, thanks. He's practicing being the worst horse so he can stumble through being a Zen teacher. So Alison, do you want to say anything?
Well, I was really touched and struck by how everyone who's spoken defines what the qualities of the worst horse in a different way. And Michelle talking about Thanksgiving and how in her own mind she's still trying to learn to love her family and make the perfect meal. And I also liked the dancing Mexican horses, and the worst horse, the one that wouldn't dance. And you, John, when you were saying how when you first started with Zendos, you just couldn't sit still, and your mind was just as chaotic as your body, and how somehow that definition disqualifies me, whatever I've defined it as the worst, is that it disqualifies me from entering the situation I find myself in, and the kind of the pain of that. And I remember my very first session when I had not been called on to see a teacher for days and days, and I just didn't know what was going wrong, but I was pretty sure it had something to do with me being the worst Zen student in the room. And I had all kinds of ideas of what that was and why I wasn't being called, but how it kept expressing something. I just didn't want to be the ultimately worst horse, which would be a horse that cried, that I didn't want to be the horse that cried in the Zendo. And I think primarily that I really didn't want to be the horse that other people saw needed help. I didn't want to be the horse that asked for help and let people know I was in trouble. And that was my way of like avoiding entering into communion or connection with other people. So that's all.
When I first did meditation, I thought, I don't know what I thought, but I kept trying to empty my mind, which, considering its contents wasn't a stupid idea. but some stage I realized just to have compassion for everything that arises and everything that lives. And the mind comes naturally to rest, and the universe, the galaxies, everything's here. Everything anyone can feel or discover or love or be delighted by. It's here in our own hearts now. The horse who won't dance like as he's wanted to. As we want him to. All of that, yeah. Then you won't dance the way you tell yourself to especially that. So, friends, I think we did it, and thank you for being, horses, all horses together, and the worst horse, the best horse, the worst horse. It's always more fun to be the worst horse.
To support these episodes or learn more about upcoming programs and retreats at Pacific Zen Institute, visit us at pacificzen.org. You'll find details on John Tarrant's Sunday talks, our Open Temple morning meditation, and our Zen Luminaries series featuring intimate conversations with scholars, poets, and teachers of koan Zen. Thanks for listening.